Risk of Rain is a 2D game that came out over 10 years ago, and just a couple days ago we got a remastered version of the original. So today I'd like to kind of cover some of the topics related to this game, answer some questions like is it a good sequel or not, and of course if you've never heard of this game before, maybe introduce you to some of the interesting aspects of it. So with that said, let's begin. The gameplay loop. So the gameplay is structured based around characters. You pick 1 out of 15 that you want to start a run with, and then you go across multiple levels or stages, each one with a boss fight at the end with the teleporter. And so you clear these bosses, you go to the next stages, the bosses get tougher until eventually you meet the final boss. And if you beat him, you beat the game. You probably have multiple runs under your belt before you actually beat the game, as it's designed to be somewhat of a trial and error, along with some random generation gameplay mechanics, such as the item system. So items spawn in crates, kind of like your traditional battle royale. As you clear mobs, you get coins, and you spend coins on the crates, generally speaking, and then you get items. Boss mobs also drop some pretty good stuff, and then as you get more of these items over time, your character just gets progressively more powerful. I would say it's almost a requirement to get good items to beat the game, at least consistently or in a fast pace, just due to the nature of how fast mobs can scale as the timer goes up. The controls feel pretty satisfying in the game. They're your traditional WASD or arrow keys, and then you can shoot with the control, JKL, all that stuff, or you can use your mouse in a new updated control scheme. The characters function similar to other games such as Overwatch, League, or any traditional MMO where you pick a character class and then get a set of abilities to beat the game with. And as you beat the game and complete challenges, you unlock more abilities that you can take and choose from out of the 4. So the controls are pretty good. The settings are somewhat lackluster. There's not too many to change, and I do like the sliders and the numbers, pretty fun. One thing I do wish is the camera zoom. I wish it had more options. Right now it's just a 1x or a 2x, and it feels like 1x is too zoomed out, but 2x is way too close to accurately gauge where the teleporter is in most runs. So I find myself switching between 1x and 2x quite often, but it breaks the gameplay immersion having to switch over quite a bit. Okay, the story and the art. This game has somewhat of an esoteric story that you can pick up on just by naturally playing the game. It also has a pretty big codex describing all the mobs and where they came from and all their lore and all that type of stuff. I would say most people aren't really going to be interested in all that because they're going to be just going for the big numbers and interesting item builds. But the lore is pretty interesting once you take a look at it. I'm not going to cover it too much here, that way I don't spoil it, as it is a relatively new remake. But I do find it interesting that developers chose to make Providence the final boss. Compared to some of the previous games in the Risk of Rain franchise, such as the Risk of Rain 2 3D version and then the OG Risk of Rain, I would say this one is one of the more fun ones. If you haven't played the original game in a while, it definitely feels kind of dated at this point, having like a 2013 type of engine. Mechanics are just a little bit clunky, frame rates are a little bit choppy when lots of mobs are on the screen. And this new one got changes where depending on the character you play, you can aim left and right in different ways to better kite and do all that type of stuff with your player movement. The soundtrack is pretty amazing as well, just like the original game. All these songs, in my opinion, are very, very great. They get you hyped, and they make the time pass pretty quick while you're listening to them. So it pairs really well for this type of game. There's a lot of replayability that comes with this as well. Since it is modeled as like a roguelike, there's lots of respawning, lots of randomly generated maps, randomly generated items, to where the same core gameplay loop of beat 5 or 6 levels and bosses feels different pretty much every time, just due to the fact that you have so many different items each run. And then once you add in all the different characters you can play, I think there's 15 at the moment, the different levels and how the teleporters can spawn, the different bosses. It feels like a new game each run, just using the same core engine. It's a really fun gameplay loop, and I spent a lot of time on this game back in the day. The remaster is quite fun as well.